Have your fantasy teams been struggling this year? Or perhaps you've been doing pretty well but want to put yourself over the top? Then make sure to visit our friends over at Finish First Fantasy Advisors. They are the premier one-on-one consulting firm that specializes in providing you with expert support to help guide you to the championship. You will be matched with one of their expert advisors to provide you with the season-long insight for your redraft, dynasty, or DFS formats. Their advisors will contact you weekly to answer all of your questions and provide you the needed information to get to the next level. Set up a free 15-minute consultation by emailing them at info@finishfirstfantasy.com or by visiting them at www.finishfirstfantasy.com. That's www.finishfirstfantasy.com. Hello and welcome to a special Friday edition of the SkullKing Sports Fantasy Football Podcast. My name is Ryan Scullrud. I am your host, and I had mentioned a few days ago on our last show that I was going to try to do a kind of a sleepers and bust show. I was going to try to do it the next day, and just with different family circumstances, I had a birthday earlier this week that just I didn't feel like doing it, but I wanted to make sure to get the information out for you guys. So I wanted to make sure to get this recorded today and get this stuff out there for you so that you guys can just kind of get a little bit of where I'm at in terms of the fantasy landscape. And another thing that I wanted to look at was the fact that there are so many injuries being announced right now that could very well affect how you set up your lineup for this weekend. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and get into that. Obviously, I need to make some major changes to my rankings because of everything that's come out, really just in the last 24 hours, and even just this morning. So what we are going to do is we are going to hop right into the news and notes, and then we'll get into our sleepers and busts. But before we do that, I wanted to give a shout out to our sponsor, Dr. Squatch Soaps. Again, you guys have seen, I've seen a whole bunch of their new ads coming through on Facebook. Absolutely hilarious. They really are a phenomenal company. All natural, cold pressed soaps, made here in the U.S., homemade, natural ingredients. I love the scents. I love the fact that I feel clean when I get out of the shower. I don't have that kind of oily residue that really is just uncomfortable when I get out of the shower. So really, you should check out Dr. Squatch Soaps. They've got everything from from soaps to shampoos. They've got toothpaste now. Let's see what else they've got. Cologne. They've got some shaving products as well. Make sure when you go to DrSquatch.com, make sure at checkout you use the promo code SKS20, because that will get you 20% off of any orders of $20 or more. Again, the promo code at checkout, SKS20, will get you 20% off of orders of $20 or more. Again, you guys will not regret it. I absolutely love, again, my favorite is their black bar, the pine tar bar. Absolutely love it. Make sure to check it out. Smells great, exfoliates well. So, that being said, again, go to drsquatch.com. At checkout, use the promo code SKS20, get 20% off of orders of $20 or more. All right, let's go ahead and hop into the headlines for the day.
Today's headlines.
All right, starting it off. I didn't necessarily do these in any particular order. I tried to do them in order of, kind of severity, and then next thing you know, there was like 10 different new things coming up. So we're just going to run through the whole list. Emmanuel Sanders is going to the COVID list and must quarantine. So with Michael Thomas also dealing with his injured hamstring, that means that it's pretty much down to Traquan Smith as the guy for New Orleans. So definitely something to watch as far as that game goes. As looking over here real quick, pulling up tight ends. Jared Cook, as far as I could see, should be okay. Had the groin injury, missed the one game, came back Monday night, contributed. I think that he should be fine after they've had their bye week this past week. So he should be completely good to go. I think that he may absorb some of those targets. Again, Traquan Smith is also going to be a big target there. So yeah, just unexpected with Emmanuel Sanders. Obviously, he's not going to be playing this next game. Jonnu Smith and A.J. Brown are both off of the injury report. Good to go Sunday against Pittsburgh in their big showdown. So you'll definitely want to keep an eye out for that. I think that Jonnu Smith will see what he can do. I know that Pittsburgh has been pretty good against tight ends. Really, the thing they've been able to stop the best is the run, and been pretty good against quarterbacks, but they allow a lot of catches and yards to wide receivers. So look for A.J. Brown and Corey Davis to possibly have decent games in this one. I definitely think that A.J. Brown should be in for a good game. But Jonnu Smith, again, I think that he should, if as long as he's healthy, he should have enough targets to at least put up respectable numbers, even with it not being the best matchup for him. So, Aaron Jones suffered a mild calf strain in practice. Obviously, he wants to go in this next game, but what I'm reading is that it looks like he may be a game time decision. So maybe Jamal Williams getting the start. Again, just be watching that. Be prepared to switch out Aaron Jones if you need to on Sunday. Both DJ Chark and Julio Jones are completely off the injury report, so they will have no injury designations going into their games this week. Joe Mixon has already been ruled out with his foot injury for this week, so Giovanni Bernard will get the start. So with Mixon, I again had him down a little bit in my rankings compared to a lot of people. I had him at 11th. A lot of experts right now are having him in the 9 to 7 range this week. I had him down at 11. That means with him out, I am probably putting. See if I can find Giovanni Bernard. Up from about 56. I'm gonna probably put him right around in that 22-23 range. So I think that he can be a serviceable low end running back too this week. Especially going up against Cleveland. Speaking of Cleveland, Austin Hooper is out for this week. Had an emergency appendectomy, so we'll definitely miss this week. Likely could miss next week as well. Hasn't been used all that much in the offense. Has been used a little bit more lately, but I want to say that coming into this part of the season, so far he was like tight end 20. Just had not been used in this offense. So Austin Hooper will be out. Not a whole lot of other options in terms of tight ends. Nothing you're going to fill in there. So, Desean Jackson, I almost feel bad for the guy. Just gets back from, was it the hamstring injury or whatever, and then on the punt return, fields the punt, gets his bell rung a little bit, and then a second guy hits him, and the way he kind of rolled over Desean Jackson's body, Jackson's foot gets caught and kind of twists and ends up spraining his ankle, and looks like he's going back on injury reserve. So, rough night for D-Jax, even though the Eagles did get the win. And a couple just trade things. The Dolphins apparently have said that they are willing to trade Jordan Howard. And the other one is there are execs across the NFL that believed that Philly was willing to trade Zach Ertz before this injury. Now looks like they're just going to stick with it. So definitely a lot of interesting news coming out. Again, whole lot of injuries that obviously we're going to have to deal with some things in terms of fantasy lineups with a lot of these. So just kind of be again, be flexible, be ready to make moves. If you need to pick up guys off of waivers or off of free agency list, find them now. If you don't have them, if you don't have guys that you feel comfortable putting in, you need to make the moves. So, all right, so we're going to get into sleepers and busts. And I did this a little bit on a podcast last night. I went over a lot of these guys with Scott Morganroth on the for the South Florida Tribune and the podcast that I do there. But I wanted to make sure that you guys get this information as well. So, sleepers, I've got, I think, a quarterback, a couple of running backs, 2 or 3 wide receivers, and a tight end. And then I have three potential busts that I'm just not, I don't feel good about them playing this week. So, and I believe I've got all 3 of them on at least one roster. A couple of them I have on like 3 or 4 rosters. So, all right. So we're going to get right into our sleepers. Number 1 sleeper for me in terms of quarterbacks is Teddy Bridgewater going against the Saints. The Saints have struggled against quarterbacks. Quarterbacks and tight ends are their main nemesis right now in terms of what they've given up in fantasy points. Right now they give up the 4th most points to quarterbacks. Only the 15th most pass yards, but they give up once they get down to the red zone, they struggle giving up touchdowns, receiving touchdowns, especially to tight ends. One of the tools that I try to use for determining who to use in terms of matchups and kind of how to judge those matchups is the Harris Index. And for those of you guys who don't know, Chris Harris, I believe he used to be with ESPN and kind of went out on his own and did his own thing with a lot of his fantasy stuff. He's big into game tape, not so much the statistical side, but he wants to see the game tape and why things happen. And so he puts out what he calls the Harris Index, and he doesn't come out until like week 5 or 6. I think it's week 6 of the season. What he does is he looks at the last 5 weeks of data in terms of fantasy points given up to quarterbacks, to running backs, to wide receivers, to tight ends, and to defenses. And so with that, he has his standard deviations and everything that to use. But what it does is it shows a recency of who is getting, how much is given up. So it's you don't just get to the end of the season and say, oh, well, this team has given up the most fantasy points to the quarterback, or this team has given up the most fantasy points to running backs. That could be overall in the season, but they've had a stretch the last 3 weeks, the last 3 to 4 weeks, where they've been really tough against those positions. And actually, there's a different team that's giving up even more points over the last 5 weeks to those positions, so they'd be a better play. So that's what the Harris Index is. According to the Harris Index, the Saints, on average, give up 2 points more than projection to quarterbacks each week over the last 5 weeks. So that right there indicates that Teddy Bridgewater is going to be in for a little bit better day. And with the offense not having all their weapons in terms of the pass game, we'll kind of see how well the offense moves and whether they're giving the ball back to Carolina a bunch. So, again, just there's a lot of things to watch in there. Another thing for Teddy Bridgewater is he has improved this year with the type of weapons that he has. Now, I'm not saying that he didn't have weapons when he was playing last year, filling in for Drew Brees when he was with the Saints, because obviously they had Michael Thomas, they still had Alvin Kamara, still had Jared Cook. However, this year, I think it's more the offensive system. Teddy Bridgewater has a higher completion air yards and intended air yards than he did in last year with the Saints. So that means he's throwing the ball deeper. He is he's completing passes farther down the field. And his aggressiveness percentage, which deals with how often a receiver is targeted, or how often the ball gets to the receiver and a defender is within 1 yard of the receiver. His aggressiveness percentage is, I want to say, about 12%, which the lowest in the league is Russell Wilson, 8.9%. So Teddy Bridgewater is second in terms of not forcing the ball when he doesn't need to. So I think that Teddy Bridgewater is going to be in for a good game, and I'd be willing to use him to save a little cash in my DFS lineups this weekend. So moving on to the running backs. Number one that I've got is Desean Jackson going up against Jacksonville. Jacksonville has been awful against running backs. Now, mind you, they played against some pretty good running backs. And, going again to the Harris Index, they give up 3.6 points above projection on average each week over the last 5 weeks to running backs. But they've also given up the 5th most points to running backs. They have given up the 5th most rush yards per game as well. And Desean Jackson has shown to be the better running back since he came up to sub for Austin Eckler going on IR. Josh Kelly was supposed to be kind of the guy to break out this year as a rookie in LA for the Chargers, but he just hasn't been that. Looking at next gen stats, he's one of the most inefficient when it comes to getting to the line of scrimmage. He's also one of the slowest at getting to the line of scrimmage. And that's of running backs who I want to say through 6 weeks have at least 50 carries. So Kelly has not been good enough. And so I think that Desean Jackson, having a little extra experience, I think could be in for a bigger day. And now I'm not saying that Desean Jackson is going to put up running back one numbers, but I definitely think that Jackson could find himself as a mid to high end running back 2 this week, kind of that 12 to 16 range, just based off the matchup. So, and then let's not forget that because they've got Justin Herbert, who's throwing the ball all over the place, Jacksonville's defense is struggling all over, and so it just could provide, if the pass game is going well, it could provide more opportunity. If they get up big, more opportunity to let Desean Jackson just run the ball. So, all right, getting back to that Carolina and New Orleans game, my second running back that I'm looking at this week as a sleeper is Latavius Murray. Carolina gives up the 6th most amount of points to running backs. They average giving up 3.7 points per week extra to running backs. Now, I know, again, I understand Alvin Kamara is the guy in the Saints' backfield. That being said, I can see Latavius Murray having another big game. Again, we've got Michael Thomas potentially missing this week. You've got Emmanuel Sanders, who just went on the COVID list. So you got Traquan Smith as your main wide receiver. You look at what Carolina has done defensively. And yes, they give up 3.7 points per week extra over projection to running backs. They give up 6.3 points less than projection to quarterbacks and 8.8 points less per week compared to projections for wide receivers, which means it may be a tough passing game, which means they're going to stay on the ground. Honestly, I believe that the Saints are going to stay on the ground in this game, which I think leads to a very great opportunity for Latavius Murray. Murray is, according to Next Gen Stats, Murray is 7th in run efficiency. And run efficiency, again, is how quickly or how much yardage is covered to get to the line of scrimmage. And he is first in average time behind the line of scrimmage in under 2.5 seconds. I believe it's from the snap, getting the ball, and to the line of scrimmage, I believe. And he's just under 2.5 seconds. Fastest in the league right now, and one of the most efficient in getting to the line of scrimmage from the snap. He is 3rd in rush percentage over expected. Now, what this is it's rush percentage over expected is based on Next Gen Stats and how they view things in terms of how many people are in the area, whether or not he gets hit, how big a hole is open, that sort of thing. There's a certain expected amount of yards based on those factors of how much a runner or a wide receiver should get. Murray averages getting over that projection or over that expectation almost 50% of the time. So he really has had explosive plays more often than many, compared to, what's open for him, more than a lot of many other running backs in the league. So Carolina gives up the 15th most amount of rush yards. So they're right in the middle of the pack in terms of how many yards they give up. However, they've given up the 3rd most rushing TDs. So if they get into the red zone, if the Saints get into the red zone, I think that Latavius Murray vultures at least 1, if not 2, touchdowns from Alvin Kamara this week. All right, moving to the wide receivers. Cole Beasley versus the New York Jets. Beasley is averaging as many targets right now as Mike Davis, as Tyreek Hill, and T.Y. Hilton. Which that's not something you'd expect. Now, most people say, okay, well, that means those other guys are down. Yeah. However, Cole Beasley in full point PPR. Most of our rankings are half point PPR. That's kind of how the main industry standard right now has gone to half PPR. In full PPR formats, Cole Beasley has 9 PPR points or more in 18 of his last 21 games going back to week 1 of 2019, so ever since he joined the Bills. 5 of 6 games this year, he has had 6+ targets. The one game he had less than 6 targets, he had 4. In that game, he went on 4 targets, 3 catches for 32 yards and a touchdown. So he is getting used. He is being targeted. At one point, I believe he was on pace for almost 1,000 yards. I think through 4 weeks he was on pace for 1,000 yards. I think over the last couple weeks he's dropped under that. But he's also getting touchdowns. Right now he is tied for 19th in red zone targets in the NFL. So that's not just 19th in wide receivers. That's 19th in wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs combined. He is 19th in the league in red zone targets in the NFL. So again, Cole Beasley, again, going up against a non-existent Jets defense, I believe is in for a very good game this week. And again, he's right about wide receiver 35 or so on the season. That 30 to 35. I think that he could put up, again, right around top 25 to top 20 numbers this week against the Jets. Now, I know part of the reason for that also is because John Brown has also been declared out for this week. So it's going to be Cole Beasley and Stephon Diggs in terms of wide receivers. John Brown is out, and Dawson Knox, I believe, has also been out. It's either Dawson Knox or Tyler Kroft. They've been going back and forth on who's actually healthy. So Cole Beasley, I think, is in for a decent game this week. Another wide receiver, T. Higgins, currently ranked. Let me pull up my rankings. And actually, let's do. There we go. T. Higgins. Load this up compared to the experts' consensus. There we go. Where do I have him? I want to say T. Higgins right now is being ranked right around number 37, 38 overall for week 7. I think that he can put up some decent numbers. The Bengals are going up against Cleveland. Cleveland gives up the 4th most amount of points to wide receivers, the 4th most pass yards per game, and have given up the 5th most touchdowns. T. Higgins has had a lot of success over the last couple of weeks. He has, he's averaging 8 targets over the last 4 weeks, 5 receptions over the last 4 weeks, and I'm pulling up his game-by-game stats. And even in week 2, he still had 6 targets. So 6 for 3 for 35. Or 3 for 6 for 35. He had the 2 touchdowns in week 3 on 40 yards. But this last week, 6 catches on 8 targets for 125 yards. So they're starting to stretch the field with him a little bit more. And again, going against Cleveland, who has struggled a lot this season in pass defense, I think that T. Higgins could put up a big, solid game this week. So for me, that's another wide receiver that I think could put up low to mid end wide receiver 2 numbers when he's ranked right now as about a wide receiver 3. My last wide receiver to go over is Christian Kirk. And it pains me to say this, but going up against Seattle. Seattle gives up the most fantasy points to wide receiver. But here's the thing. They give up a lot to wide receiver, but they only, over the last 5 weeks, given up 0.1 points over projected to wide receivers. They give up the most pass yards per game, and that is actually where Seattle is giving up all their fantasy points. They're giving it all up in catches and yards. Seattle has only given up 8 passing touchdowns on the season so far. So just to kind of compare, let me pull up the entire all the defenses. In terms of passing, the total amount of touchdowns given up, they're actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They're tied for 8th in the league in terms of least amount of pass touchdowns given up. Chicago has given up 4. There's 6 teams that have given up 7, and the Seahawks are one of 4 teams to only give up 8. Where you've got teams like the Atlanta Falcons have given up 18. The Cleveland Browns have given up 13. So I expect Christian Kirk to get a lot of yards on, was it those little shovel passes on the sweep, rush yards on sweeps. I expect Christian Kirk to get some yardage. Historically, Seattle gives up more yards and bigger games to wide receivers to the second wide receiver than they do the first. I'm not saying that DeAndre Hopkins is not in for a big game this game. He very well could be. That being said, I really believe you can make the case that Christian Kirk is going to be in for a huge game and possibly, I'm not saying for sure, but possibly could put up more points again this week than DeAndre Hopkins. That doesn't mean I'm ranking him above DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins is still a top 5 wide receiver for this week. So, but just looking at that, Christian Kirk could very well be in for a big game. One other thing, Christian Kirk is in the top 10 or top 20 in the league in yards after catch per reception. So once he gets the ball, he's done a very good job of getting the extra yardage. And he's also top 10 in targeted air yards. So he gets targeted deep down the field. So Christian Kirk should be in for a good game, unfortunately for me. Our tight end sleeper is Jimmy Graham. Now, it's not the best matchup going up against the Rams. The Rams give up only the 14th most fantasy points to tight ends. However, recently they've given up 2.6 points above projection per game to tight ends. Jimmy Graham is second in red zone targets in the league. The only person who has more than him is Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce has 12. Jimmy Graham has 11. So he's basically averaging 2 red zone targets per game. I mean, that is opportunity that you just don't see all the time. So he's also 5th in the league in tight ends in touchdowns. So because of that, I think that with how LA struggled last week on defense against San Francisco, I can see Chicago moving the ball a little bit here and there, and once they get down deep enough, I can see Jimmy Graham getting at least 1 touchdown. So he is definitely a guy that I have for at least 1 touchdown this week from the tight end position. All right, so we're going to go to our three potential busts, and honestly, I don't think that these are all that these aren't all that controversial. And you can say, "Oh, you're not really picking hard busts." You're right. But there's enough believers in these players that I just want to make sure that you have all the facts. First potential bust is Josh Jacobs. And it pains me to say this. I have him like 2 or 3 leagues. But Josh Jacobs going up against Tampa Bay. The Bucs give up the 8th least amount of fantasy points to running backs. They give up 4.8 points under projection to running backs so far over the last 5 weeks. And there's a kind of a disturbing trend for Josh Jacobs just overall. Over the last 16 regular season games, he has only gotten over his projected amount of points 38% of the time. He is averaging over that 6 weeks almost a full point under projection per week. Tampa Bay is also, giving up the 13th least amount of rush yards per game. So I think that this game is not going to be all that high scoring. I think that this could be kind of a punch 'em kind of a game. And so I don't see Josh Jacobs going off for 20 points. He may get into the end zone. He may get into the opportunity to get into the end zone. I am prepared if I have to start him based on injuries and everything in my lineups. I'm prepared to not start him. And if I have to start him, I'm prepared for him not to have a good game. I'm not going to be like, I can't believe you didn't score. You didn't reach your projection. I'm prepared for that not to happen this week. You should be too if you're starting Josh Jacobs. Number 2, Cooper Kupp. Now, this isn't an admonishment of the fact that he struggled last week. This isn't, well, I guess if it was the opposite and he did well last week, I'd be chasing points if I said he was going to have a good week. That's not what this is. This isn't just he had a bad week last week, he sucks, he's going to have a bad week this week. No, this is looking at what's going on. Chicago is the 4th best in terms of giving up points to wide receivers. They've averaged, over the last 5 weeks, giving up 4.6 points less to wide receivers. And also on top of that, let me pull up this fantasy points allowed. Pull up the fantasy points allowed. Overall, Chicago has given up the 4th best in terms of fantasy points to wide receivers. They give up the least amount of fantasy points to quarterbacks. And Jared Goff, if he gets pressured, struggles. And if he struggles, he's not finding anyone. So because of that, I am hesitant. I am prepared for Cooper Kupp. Again, if I've got to start him based on where my lineups are in terms of injuries and everything, I'm prepared for him to have another bad game. I know last week, 9 targets and only 3 catches for like 11 yards or something like that. And one of them was one of those attempts was a dropped pass in the end zone, which he does not do very often. All I'm saying is that I think that Chicago can disrupt Goff enough to make it harder for Cooper Kupp to be all that successful this week. Now, volume plays in Cooper Kupp's favor. He's averaging 7.5 targets per game. He's 8th in the league in terms of yards after catch per reception. So he does a good job once he gets the ball, getting farther downfield. Again, this Chicago defense is for real, especially against quarterbacks and wide receivers. So because of that, I am hesitant. I'm a little bit bearish on Cooper Kupp because of this. So I'm not putting him in any DFS lineups. I think I have one or two lineups where, just regular season-long leagues where he's currently in a flex, but I may move to someone else who has a better matchup. So, all right, and last but not least, Cam Newton going up against San Francisco. Cam struggled last week against Denver. San Francisco gives up the fifth least amount of pass yards per game. In terms of giving up points, they're on the better side of middle of the road, giving up the 19th most points, averaging 19.4 points to quarterbacks per week. Let me go to the Harris Index. They have given up a little bit more over the last 5 weeks, 4.3 points over projection the last few weeks. However, Cam Newton is bottom 10 in average completed air yards, bottom 4 in average intended air yards. He just doesn't have the weapons. And this defense has been playing. It played better last week against the LA Rams. They didn't play all that well against Miami, obviously. Miami just trounced them. I think that San Francisco will put up a better fight against New England this week. And just seeing some of the pressure that they've been able to get on defenses or on offenses lately, I think that they are in a better place now to get the type of pressure on Cam Newton. And again, Cam Newton doesn't have the wide receivers, doesn't have the deep threats. I mean, you look at Julian Edelman, his main receivers right now, Julian Edelman, Damiere Byrd, and N'Keal Harry. N'Keal Harry's looking towards being a bust this year. Just in Dynasty as a bust, just not working out. And then passes to the running backs like Burkhead and White. So that's where a lot of his passing is going to come from. I don't have in front of me how many rushing yards San Francisco tends to give up to quarterbacks. That being said, I still think San Francisco will do enough that I'm a little bit bearish on Cam Newton. I've got other quarterbacks I would much rather use. Again, I would play Teddy Bridgewater over Cam Newton this week. So, all right, so there's our sleepers and busts for this week. I hope this has been informative. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. We will be back recording Sunday night after Sunday Night Football with our Kings and Stings episode 4, Week 7. Prepping for doing our waiver wire show Monday night. And then we'll kind of see what happens for the rest of the week next week. So, again, thank you so much for listening. I hope this has been informative. My name is Ryan Skullrud. This has been the SkullKing Sports Fantasy Football Podcast. I'll talk to you guys later. Hey, SkullKing Nation. Thank you for listening to the SkullKing Football Podcast. Did you like this episode? If so, be sure to go to iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and YouTube to subscribe. Also, please leave us a rating and reviews to let us know how we can better help you rule your leagues.